Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this joint meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee and the Audit and Governance Committee. This is the second such meeting for us to continue our review of the draft Combined Authority Constitution. Having considered parts 1 to 5 4 weeks ago, this evening we'll be focusing on parts 6 and 7. So we'll go through and introduce officers who will be guiding us through that in a little bit. I'll begin with apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Merritt, who's substituted by Councillor Clark, from Councillor Taylor, who's substituted by Councillor Nelson, from Councillor Widdowson, who's substituted by Councillor Hook, and I've just received apologies from Councillor Hollier, who isn't substituted. I think that's everyone accounted for. Yes, thank you. The next item is election of chair, as this is a joint committee. I didn't arrange for Councillor Hollier not to be here. He has got car issues. No. So are you content? I say I've started, so I'll finish. Are you content for me to finish off this piece of work in the chair? Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest they would wish to declare? Councillor Myers? No? Okay. All right. So, yes. No? Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes from our previous Combined Authority Constitution discussion. Does anyone have any matters of accuracy arising from the minutes? Because I'm sure everyone remembers all 3 3/4 hours worth. Councillor Rose.
Just one thing, which is that it talks about agreeing amendments to the Constitution, but we don't have the power to agree those amendments. So I'd suggest that it should say proposed amendments rather than amendments.
Yeah, agreeing. Which page, paragraph? Sorry.
It's at the start. It's before the list of actions. It says these were the amendments, etc., etc. Agreed. Members proceeded to review the draft Constitution, raising concerns and amendments, but raising concerns and proposing amendments.
Okay. Yeah. So where we had proposed amendments. Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other comments on the minutes? Are we happy to, with that change made, happy to agree those minutes? Thank you. Agenda item 4, public participation. We have no public speakers at this evening's meeting. Agenda item 5, combined authority governance. So thank you to members for your input into the last round of recommended amendments, which were read out in detail at the inaugural meeting of the Combined Authority, which I was very pleased to see, and hopefully all of our North Yorkshire colleagues were suitably impressed at our commitment to reviewing the document. What came out of that meeting was that some of the proposed changes were accepted because it was either a presentational change or a clarification. The interim monitoring officer, Suzanne Harrington, who presented that item, said that the remainder of our proposed amendments would be considered and a report would need to come back to the Combined Authority, offering a view for members of the Combined Authority to then make a decision as to whether they wanted to adopt our proposed amendments. So I don't think that's happened yet, but that will presumably be coming to a future meeting of the Combined Authority. So our task this evening is to conclude our review of the draft Constitution by looking at parts 6 and 7. If any members have any other comments they want to make on part 8, then they can do. But we did touch on that briefly at the last meeting. Councillor Rose?
Just checking if that means we shouldn't raise any point that was made on the previous one that hasn't been updated. Is that carte blanche? We're waiting for the latest.
Yeah. I think rather than go back over the recommendations we did make, I think we should wait to see what transpires in terms of it, and we'll need to be on the ball to check whether some of the amendments we felt very strongly needed to be made, if they are subsequently not adopted, then we'll need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, it was a long list of things that were non-controversial, and therefore they weren't things to be taken away for discussion. I would assume they just haven't been made. We can take it later, but it's going to be a long meeting the next time around as well if we aren't tackling it. But that's all.
I think there'll be some work to do in terms of as and when there is a hopefully track change version next time round of the draft constitution, so we can see which amendments we proposed have been adopted, both the non-controversial ones and the potentially more contentious ones. We probably wouldn't need to do that in a meeting, but there's some work for us to do. It may be if we do that outside of a meeting and then decide that we're suitably unhappy that we want to have a meeting to discuss that further, then we can do. So let's see how we go. So if I can invite officers to say anything else that they would like to say before we jump into the discussion on the constitution. Right, first of all, I'll ask Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself to members so that they know who you are?
Hello, I'm Rachel Antonelli. I am the Interim Deputy Monitoring Officer for the Combined Authority. I work with Barry Khan, who's the Interim Monitoring Officer for the Combined Authority.
Thank you, and Bryn.
Thank you, Chair. All I will just say is I will consider my thunder duly stolen. I don't think there's much else I need to say on the reports. I think it's over to members to how you feel about parts 6 and 7. And you can get straight into the details if you wish.
Let's do that. So, as I did at the last meeting, when I referred to a page number, I'll be referring to the number at the top of the page, not the number at the bottom of the page. So hopefully that won't cause too much confusion, but we managed to work our way through that last time round. So part 6 of the draft constitution begins on page 145. Page 146 is the contents page. I know Councillor Merritt did raise comments on the contents page last time round. Would anybody like to raise comments on the contents page this time round? I'm not seeing anything. Okay. So page 147. Any members have any comments on page 147? Councillor Melly.
It's actually a note from Councillor Merritt about paragraph 1.3. Yeah, he speaks through me wherever I go. Yeah, paragraph 1.3 about the section 73 officer reporting about the administration of financial affairs, reporting to the combined authority, and whether that should also come to the audit and governance committee of the combined authority. And yeah, and then also a note from me about the gendered language, but I won't point that out on every single occasion because I'll be here all night. There's a lot of
and that was there was a commitment to remove all gender specific references. Obviously that hasn't worked its way through to this yet, but so the point of paragraph 1.3 in terms of the section 73 officer shall report to the combined authority any significant failure to comply. Suggestion is that should also be reported through to the audit and governance committee. I'll leave you to decide who's going to answer which.
I think my immediate observation would be, Chair, that very much as our section 151 officer has a legal duty to report to the council as the complete body corporate. That's why this will be section 73 reporting to the combined authority as the body corporate. That doesn't stop them talking to and taking things through audit and governance. But if you were talking about something like a section 114 notice in our context, that wouldn't go through audit and governance, it would go straight to council. And that's where the responsibility.
Okay, so it's not saying that things couldn't or wouldn't go to audit and governance. Yeah. Okay, councillor Eyre.
I suppose it's a technical point because those are quite different. Well, similarities, they are quite different because if we take it to full council, that takes it to all 47 members. If you take it to combined authority, that only takes it to 4 members.
4 or 5. Yeah.
So it just feel like that's taking it to full council gives everybody the opportunity to deal with it, which is why that would go to full council. That's not the same in the combined authority, so you might want to take a different approach.
It's correct that it's not the same as having that volume of people, but it is still the parent body to all of the committees that sit underneath it. So you are taking it to the highest authority that there is within the combined authority, i.e. the body corporate itself.
I suppose it's I suppose because the combined authority is the equivalent of full council. That's just how it's set up.
It would be like the monitoring officer issuing a section 5 report, that would go straight to council. Here, it would go straight to the combined authority in this way.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I wondered if you could tidy it up by just adding something like, and will also at the same time notify the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. And then it puts it into the chair's hands to decide what they do with it, but doesn't prolong anything else.
I suppose I think the point here is if there is a concern as to the proper administration of the finances, that actually takes it out of the hands of the Audit and Governance Committee anyway, because you are reporting the equivalent of a section 114. You're recording the equivalent of a section 5 notice. You are saying there is something so fundamentally wrong that this needs to be dealt with immediately.
Councillor Melly.
I was just going to say, following on from what Councillor Eyre said, that in the situation of City of York Council, all the members of the Audit and Governance Committee are on full council, so they would be notified, whereas it's different with the combined authority because it's completely separate membership. So that means members of the
But
Audit and Governance
this is about
Committee maybe not
legal
even.
lines of accountability rather than the practical matters of would they speak to the chair separately?
Yeah, I suppose it is sort of under this sort of general heading, and last time we talked about roles and responsibilities of audit and governance. So I'm guessing there's a link through there. Councillor Eyre.
I think it's probably me just not liking the whole system as a whole, but it doesn't sit right, because if you're looking at that, and if we have a situation at City of York where the executive are doing something untoward, as it were, then that would be reported through to full council. That's your higher body, which then can say, well, actually, something's gone awry there. Here, it would be those members of the combined authority potentially, and they are the 5 that would potentially have been doing something that then is getting reported back to, and they're the only ones that there is no, because that top level is completely conflated, there is no recourse back.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think we're not talking, as Rachel said, we're not talking about a larger body with subcommittees. We're talking about almost an executive at the top level with different people and larger bodies underneath whose role is to scrutinise. I mean, I'm not going to repeat it every time all the way through sections 5, 6, 7, but audit and governance has no teeth at all the way through this document. It just is less powerful than in both of the different councils that we have in existence today. It should be responsible. We have so many different independent reports that come to A&G at York. This isn't just if we're issuing some major financial implosion of the authority. It's any regulatory breach that's significant that does come through A&G and then goes through to full council. I think that should be exactly what it does here, and I imagine that's what it does in North Yorkshire today as well, because it'd be crazy if it didn't.
So I think, given the concerns expressed and the structure of the combined authority, which we can't change, I'm inclined to suggest that we should at least recommend that paragraph 1.3 be amended to say shall report to the combined authority and the audit and governance committee any significant failure, and then more members are aware and can either can consider what further action they might want to take. I think that's probably for now the best we can do. So first recommendation on the list. Okay, so we're still on page 147. Any other comments on that page? Okay. Moving down to page 148. Okay, Councillor Melly.
At the bottom of the page, paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6 refers to the audit committee. That should probably just be updated to audit and governance.
Audit and governance, yeah.
And lots of gendered language on that page too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Rose.
It was exactly that point. It also says it on pages. This is the bottom number pages, not the top number pages, but on pages 54, 134, 141, 146 and 222, it references audit committee.
Audit
So
committee.
for whoever's picking up afterwards, there are the numbers they can look at.
That's fine. That's the.
That sounds.
Sure, that's just an error
we'll
of
find
omission
and replace
rather
to me,
than-
Chair.
It's not a separate secret committee.
I think it's a copy and paste from another constitution, but that's
We'd already picked up that on that, so that that will come out.
Okay. Page 149. Councillor Melly, then Councillor Ely.
Paragraph 5.2. I'm just wondering what the process is for scrutinising business plans. Because it didn't look like that was in the constitution anywhere. Is it solely the responsibility of the chief officers, or is there member oversight of that as well?
So oversight of business plans. Where would that be reported to? If anywhere.
I would anticipate that will be reported up to the combined authority
Okay.
as the overall decision-making body.
Mhm.
But we can certainly ask the question as to where would be the most appropriate place for that to go and whether we need to include that in the constitution.
Okay. Councillor Healy, then Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Section 4.1, well, the whole of section 4, really. Given we're setting up the new body, do we really need to be referencing checks and facsimiles?
I don't see any harm in doing so.
Just
They still
saying.
exist.
Sounds a bit 1990, that's all.
Well, it was a golden decade, but it's but the point's made, but yeah, they still exist.
And chair businesses still use them.
Yeah. Councillor Burton, then Councillor Hook.
Going back to section.
And to put your microphone.
Just back to 5.2, and this is Councillor Merritt's again.
Carry on, Councillor Burton.
It incorporates Councillor Melly's comments, but I think this let's put a little bit more. So should perhaps say an accessible record of business plans and variations over a certain threshold should be maintained and available for inspection by A&G members and the public, perhaps. And similarly for contract variations in 12.4.
So the suggestion is that the business plans would be accessible to the public.
Perhaps it's, yeah. I suppose
it
where
would,
it's
yeah.
possible to do that. I know not all things can be.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing that would be FOIable, and I couldn't think of a reason why unless it contained commercial in confidence information,
Yeah.
Yeah, because ordinarily, yeah, business plans would, I think in some authorities, you would see a business plan for a directorate, for example. That's the kind of thing that would come to overview and scrutiny or audit and governance in terms of how does that directorate intend to deliver the agreed objectives.
Mhm.
The kind of thing I think probably would end up at overview and scrutiny, well, certainly if they requested it. I'll add that to the list of suggestions. Councillor Hook.
Yeah, I must admit, thank you, Chair, I got confused because the contents after number 10 is not what the contents are. So they are out. I don't know if people have spotted that, but I have, because I was looking for the payments section, which is now number 19, not number 20, because I looked at the checks and I thought, you're going into all that performance about facsimile signatures and things, which I think is horrendous doing facts. I would never allow it when I was an auditor. They were just completely no way, because that leaves staff who run it through the facsimile machine totally vulnerable to being accused of stealing, because that happened in the Chicago office that I worked in. But payments, then when you get to section 19 on payments, all it just says is a safe way of making payments. So if you're not going to go into detail on payments of anything, you know, it's not the right balance in my view.
Okay, so in terms of the section 5, the budgetary control.
Well, I was still back on the payments side.
Okay,
Some,
hold that thought for when
I
we get
couldn't,
to
the
that.
checks. Oh, I thought you were doing about checks.
Yes, so Councillor Healy mentioned.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were there.
So we talk about checks in the context of section 4. And we decided that we would keep the reference to checks.
Yeah, but I said, why on earth are you mentioning that they can do facsimiles on that payment?
Um,
And you can't say it's because there's zillions of
which
checks anymore.
paragraph are you referring to?
Chair, so
Hang on,
point of
can I
clarification,
just deal with
it was a point of clarification, Chair, that was
Yeah.
all.
Okay,
But-
carry on.
That the facsimile is a copy of the signature. It's not a facsimile as in a facsimile machine that some of us may remember from days gone by. The facsimile is a legal copy of a signature. That's what that refers to.
Okay.
But who's
Not-
applying it? 4.2.
Right, okay, so we're clear, we're not talking about fax machines.
No, I wasn't doing that.
Essentially, Chair, you're talking about a printed signature rather than an actual signed signature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I think the number of checks that will be issued will be vanishingly small.
Yeah, so it doesn't
In comparison to
justify
back
that. You can
payments and
get
things,
your
but-
pen out.
I suppose it leaves the option there if it's absolutely required.
Yeah, I think as a backstop in the event of someone being unavailable for whatever reason. But anyway. I think the comments have been noted and I'm sure can be reflected on. There was another hand that I missed, Councillor Rowley. No. Councillor Mason, sorry.
I was just going back to 5.2, and I don't know whereabouts it is, but in the document further on, it goes on about business cases for set things like property or land or whatever else. So I think probably it's already covered somewhere else that if you do a business case for a certain type of thing, it will be publicly accessible because it's part of the decision-making process.
Okay, well, we might happen upon that later in terms of process.
If I may, I think there's a difference between business cases to do something and the business plan, which in the context of 5.2 is essentially saying,
Yeah.
You need a plan to make sure that you don't overspend the budget.
Yeah.
Is roughly how I would read it. Unfortunately, the problem we have is we have two lawyers here talking about finance,
Yeah,
which could make everybody's life interesting.
we've got enough expertise elsewhere in the room. So we can work our way through it. Any other comments on that? On that page 148, 149? No. I was going to ask, bottom of page 149, the reference to TFN, Transport for the North. Which I'm sure we picked this up at the last meeting, but I can't remember whether we did or not. So I just wanted to check what the relationship between the Combined Authority and Transport for the North in the context of this constitution.
I was going to say that I think it because we've used a template from another combined authority, and we've just taken the name out, I'm proposing that 611 and 612, where it makes reference to Chief Executive of TFN, is deleted, because they have their own constitution, they will have their own set of rules.
Yeah, it may be, I don't know, the Greater Manchester have more of a different relationship with TFN, but that's fine, so I have to wonder a bit what that meant. So we're now on page 150. So I had one question, which was paragraph 6.2.4. The combined authority may veto the draft mayor's general budget. And I can't remember whether we covered it under the governance section, whether it's, is there is it just a veto by majority, or, and I probably should know the answer to this, but it probably would be worth, it may appear elsewhere in the constitution, but it'd probably be helpful to have it here as well. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's on exactly the same paragraph, just a slightly different question related to when it says that the committee or the combined authority may veto the general budget component, the mayor's precept and the associated borrowing. Are those treated as separate items for the sake of the vote, or would that not all just be considered under the basis of the mayor's budget itself? Would there be one vote, or would a committee hypothetically be able to approve the budget and then veto the borrowing, for example?
Do we know the answer to that? Rachel?
Great question.
There you go.
Brilliant.
So I think the recommendation is for clarity.
Yeah. My understanding is that there will be a mayor's budget as well as a combined authority budget. Just to complicate everybody's life further.
Councillor Nelson?
Thank you. On this, can I just check that I'm reading this right? So, the combined authority may either approve or veto the mayor's budget when the mayor puts the budget in, at which point, if they veto it, the mayor has to submit a revised budget, must submit a revised budget, but at that point, the combined authority must approve the mayor's budget.
That's my reading of it.
That's how I'm reading this.
Yeah. So
They will approve the budget.
Yeah, there's no ability for the combined authority to say, thanks for the revisions, however, we're still not happy, please have another go.
And actually, is there a point in there being part of the process where it has to come back to the combined authority almost, if they have no choice but to approve it the second time round?
Okay. Let's see if others have a similar reading. Councillor Eyre.
I think I was going to raise a similar question. And what is that? Can you set at least a percentage threshold or whatever? Because if you just change £1 to 99p, then you've revised the budget and the whole thing was pointless. So as it stands, literally, you don't have to. There's a stalling process. That means you've got to come back and do it again. But unless you set some sort of minimum threshold, then the whole section is pretty pointless.
Councillor Mason.
Just going back to the old police and crime panel, and this is exactly what would happen there, was that the police and crime commission would bring a budget. You might say, we don't like this, we think you need to look at that again, whatever, they'd come back, and then that was it. Basically, it had to be approved either way. So I think it's probably that type of system.
So that's how it currently works with the police and crime. Okay. Councillor Millie.
Thanks. Yeah, I had the exact same questions, because the way it reads, it makes it look like the budget can only be vetoed once, and then it has to be approved the second time. And it also makes it, even though the wording is things like proposed changes and recommendations, it kind of makes it look like actually they're kind of obligatory rather than, recommendations or proposals.
So Rachel, do you know how it's
We
meant to work?
can take a look at the wording and compare it to the order and legislation and make it a little bit clearer.
But is that your understanding of how it is designed to work, whereby there is there can be a veto by whatever proportion of members of the combined authority, mayor will go away and make unspecified revisions, which can be of any financial value, and then when it comes back, it has to be approved?
Yes, I think councillor Mason is right that it will be akin to the panel, but I'll certainly take a look at that.
Councillor Eyre?
Yeah, I think just feeding that back through and having flashbacks to the last meeting. We had sort of long conversations about each authority being able to block things that were happening within its own borders, as it were. And we're given assurances that the quoracy made that happen, but then it doesn't. If the case of, you could then veto the budget. If the only control is a budget veto, then technically the mayor could push anything through in any year against the will of that authority. So we, for example, the mayor wanted to do something in York and the York members said, no, we don't want that. We were told that through the veto mechanism that could be stopped. It can't. It can be stopped for a meeting, but then the mayor can just come back to the next meeting and go, I'm just going to plough ahead, don't care what the two members from York think.
No.
Often not.
So-
Yes.
There are separate provisions relating to the veto of, for example, things like compulsory purchase or development than the budget. So the constitution and the order allows a veto by lead member and a secondary member of York over certain things which happen in York as in that sort of pocket of this is a development. Separate to all of that is setting of the budget and the general power to veto the budget.
Okay. So I think as well as clarity being needed around the wording, I think, yeah, there are concerns in terms of how this will work in practice and what the outcomes might be. Got Councillor Burton, then Councillor Watson.
I also have concerns around this, where this looks like there's only one veto. And I take what you're saying, but where is that written down that will override this?
So these are the financial.
So,
These are the financial sections. If you go into earlier sections of the constitution, which talk about things like, let's say, compulsory purchase and the mayoral development corporation, that's where you'll find the veto powers for the individual authorities.
Thank you.
right. Do you think we should reference them then maybe?
It would probably be helpful a cross-reference to the protocols around decision-making in non-budgetary spheres, just so it's clearer. Councillor Nelson?
I was just wondering on this as well, whether there is or should be or could be any sort of guidelines or rules around when a veto can and can't be applied. I mean, in an outrageous situation, for example, where you have conflict between the mayor and the combined authority and people were behaving not as they should be, there's a theoretical situation out there where, you know, a veto could be used inappropriately. I wouldn't like, well, or potentially there's a situation out there where a veto could be used inappropriately because of some sort of other potential conflict going on, or maybe there isn't. But it just doesn't say. There doesn't seem to be a clear thing if those relations broke down, or if vetoing the budget was done but not on a sound set of reasons. What would happen?
It'd be tricky to set parameters with, you know, what a legitimate use of the veto would be. I think that would be tricky because then I suppose it's possible that.
But I mean, I suppose
spoiling veto.
Or like a veto because a thing that was worth like, you know, a very small element of the budget wasn't liked, but maybe that thing was something tiny, for example. Imagine if there was a situation where the combined authority vetoed the mayor's budget because they didn't like the fact that it included one change to a bus timetable. I know that wouldn't be in a financial budget, but I'm running out of ideas in my brain. I hope that my point is coming across. Like,
yeah, in terms of when,
if there was one specific subsection of a subsection of a subsection that wasn't, you know, favourable, and the whole budget was vetoed based on that, I suppose it could be easy enough to deal with. But like, if there's no parameters, technically, it could be vetoed for anything.
We can feed that back in terms of what what guidance, if any, would exist around the appropriate use of a veto. Councillor Mason?
I would just say that's politics. And I think that is the prerogative of the politicians that are elected to be unhappy with each other. And that's why the caveat is that the mayor can always pass the budget, basically, but that they can kick up a stink to start with.
Okay. Councillor Healy?
Officers, just remind me and perhaps other members of the committee that there's a difference between the combined authorities budget and the mayor's budget. And I think we're conflating the two. And then the mayor's budget, he can basically do what he likes after us, or she, they, I should say, they can do what they like. Whereas the combined authority budget has to be signed off by everyone.
Yeah, that's very much the case. I've now found the Combined Authorities Finance Order 2017, which is a riveting document, but does contain an entire part setting out the Combined Authorities mayor's budget and how that's to be determined, and reports that need to go to the mayor about proposed changes, things like that. I'm happy to circulate that to members if they would find it interesting. But yes, you are. There are two separate budgets running as part of this.
Okay, let's move on. Anything else on page 150? So moving on to page 151. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a point regarding point 732, just regarding the financing of an overspending. It says that obviously there are the virements as laid out on the next page, and those are moving the revenue or moving the capital, which I think are fairly standard ways of dealing with overspends. But then there's the idea if the other is if it's not possible to do that via virements, I'm probably saying that completely wrong. It should be referred to the mayor for consideration. Presumably that doesn't mean the mayor can then do whatever they want in order to just get the budget balance, borrow at unreasonable rates, whatever. It's just for the mayor to consider to change their budget. Perhaps we should put in something there just to specify that.
So that's actually, it's not necessarily a reference to the mayor, it's a reference to the combined authority. So you'd have the full 5 members. As far as I can see from 722.
It does just say just referred to the mayor though. So perhaps it should say to the combined authority.
Yes.
Which paragraph? In
732.
Okay, because it should probably mirror 722, which is the similar wording where it talks about referring it to the that, albeit that this obviously 7.3 is referring to the mayor's budget. So it's those, we come back to what we were saying earlier. There's the combined authority budget, and a problem with that goes to the combined authority. There's the mayor's budget, and a problem with that goes to the mayor.
I do accept that. I would just like to be clear that if there is a problem with the mayor's budget, it seems to imply that the mayor could then take that back for consideration, but notwithstanding the virements that are set out, and could instead. It doesn't say what else the mayor could do in order to balance their budget or to get it through. And I think it'd be preferable the mayor, in the event of not being able to pay for their budget, ought to also be referred to the combined authority, or at least there should be more guidance about what should be done, in my opinion.
Okay, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, just echoing, I agree with what you're saying. It says, I don't think that if the mayor's budget is going to massively overspend, it should go back to the mayor. It should be going to the full authority, personally.
Are we happy to recommend an additional check there? Yeah.
We can certainly take that back.
I suppose the question is, do you add something as simple as the word material? So if it's going to materially overspend.
Define
It's when you get lawyers in there. So if it's
inclined
going to overspend by £5,000, it's probably not an issue. If it's going to overspend by 5 million, you absolutely would want that to go to the combined authority.
Councillor Melly.
Does it depend where the legal authority sits for what that spending is on? So like the devolved powers, for example, are they to the mayor, or are they to the combined authority? Because the combined authority shouldn't be adjusting a budget and deciding where spending should be when it's not their power to spend the money, it's the mayor's.
I think so it talks about for consideration, so there would be no kind of, it would still be the mayor's decision. I think the suggestion is that the mayor, in considering, may wish to seek guidance from members of the combined authority as well. Or have I misunderstood?
Well, I think that's an accurate assessment of some of the things that have been said, but I guess my point is not that, which is that I don't think the mayor should have the authority to overspend out of their budget. It's not an unlimited pot of infinite reserves they can just do what they like with, and they've got unlimited authority over. It is a pot of money that has to balance. And it says where there's possibly some concern around overspend, and they resolve it with the finance officer. However, if there is an overspend, it should come back to the authority for a full discussion, even if it's £1. They shouldn't be able to overspend. That's their job, is to make sure it comes within budget, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I suppose in terms of, I suppose we can either say, reword 732 to say the mayor shall not overspend, or if there's a likely overspend, then to add in the requirement for it to be referred to the mayor and combined authority for consideration. That's probably more deliverable.
Yeah, it says where it is not possible to, and I think that already covers it. It's just what happens when it's not possible to that needs there. So either it should be referred to the mayor and the YNCA, or it should just be referred to the authority rather than the mayor.
I think both probably.
It can certainly be put forward as a suggestion.
Yeah,
Or A and G, probably.
and AG. Yeah, let's throw them into the mix as well. Okay. Thank you for that. So we're still on page 151. Anyone else have any comments on any of that material? Okay. 152, well, we get, I also think it was violence. I don't know whether I've been saying it wrong all these years, but violence. Councillor Melly.
So before we get there, the very top paragraph, why are York and North Yorkshire districts excluded from the register of grants? And who is the register of grants available to? Like, who keeps it and who has access to it?
So section 3, central officers shall keep a register of grants to outside organisations, excluding York and North Yorkshire districts. Rachel?
There aren't any. I'd pick that up and I've crossed it out actually. I don't know if it's from the template that we've used.
So the section 3, central officers shall keep a register of grants to outside organisations.
We could take out excluding, or propose to take out excluding York and North Yorkshire area.
I think it's just that those last 3 words that need to come out. I think in terms of where the register becomes available, any expenditure over £500 has to be listed by the authority anyway. So that register itself, I would expect to be available in a fairly open format. It'll be the responsibility of the section 73 to maintain it, but it should be open public examination.
So presumably excluding York and North Yorkshire districts could be reworded, say, excluding City of York Council and North Yorkshire Council. Was that the intention of that?
But then why are they excluded? What's the reason for that?
Indeed. You can take it that way and have a look in the book, whether that was a specific reference just to district councils or whether it was to constituent authorities, in which case, yeah, why would you exclude? Okay. Make a note of that. Okay, so we're rest of page 152. Any comments from anyone on any of that? Councillor Nelson?
It says, oh, I'm going to lose it now. In 8.3, the section 73 officers to report to and seek the prior approval of the York and Combined Authority or the mayor. Is that based on whether it's in York or North Yorkshire's budget, or whether it's from the mayor's budget, or is it just up to them to pick which one they fancy reporting to and seeking the approval of?
Rachel?
I think it depends on the budget.
Could that potentially be clarified?
Yes.
Councillor Rose?
I think that is clarified on the revenue budgets table underneath. If you look down at the capital programme, above £100,000 on the right-hand side, it says from the mayor, on the left-hand side, it says from the YMCA. So I think it clarifies throughout each pot, and who it goes to. But probably it'd be good to have a clarity that says in line with the table at such and such.
Yeah, I think if the wording of that paragraph would be clarified, so you don't then have to look at the table to figure out what it means. Okay. Anything else on that page? No. So page 153 begins with the revenue budgets table and the capital programme table. And then moves on to balance, maintenance of balances, reserves, provisions. Councillor Waller.
Thank you. I realise the previous comments made about lawyers talking about finance matters. It's really in terms of the investment strategy. The predecessor authority did lose some money on BCCI, but fortunately didn't with the Icelandic banks in 2008. But it's really having a very firm policy that doesn't put at risk any money that you have on the overnight markets that you then find out are not covered by national government guarantees.
So what do you think we need to
I just think that there needs to be additional protections built into the Treasury Management Programme to make clear that I'm sure that every finance officer has game planned what happens if, but that needs to be reflected in this to illustrate that the lessons have been learned from that period.
Yeah, we can
feed that
in.
back to the section 73 officer.
Yep. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I guess there must be equivalent provisions in the constitutions of both existing local authorities to borrow wording from.
I would have thought so. Councillor Hook?
Just quick clarification, are we all aware that the contents page does no longer tie in with the body? Good, okay, I missed that bit, I don't know.
That's the least of our worries.
I know.
Yes. Councillor Rare?
Yeah, I was going to say something that seemed eminently sensible, and I thought it's not, in terms of making sure that the principles of the Treasury management policies match the two authorities. But then I'm guessing ours probably don't always align with North Yorkshire's, so you can't do that, which then leads me to think, what happens if anything is proposed that is in breach of each individual authority's Treasury management policy? So we have a number of countries, for example, that we will not invest in as part of our policy, quite rightly. They may or may not feature in North Yorkshire's policy. Can we do anything that says, well, actually, we don't want them investing in areas where we've said that we don't believe they should?
I suppose that, yeah, because there isn't really kind of an ethical investment element to this, well, not that I've spotted anyway.
That's what I was kind of thinking is, if any investment would breach any of the policies of either constituent authority, then that would either not go ahead or would be referred somewhere. But somebody would at least actually have to sit there, so the mayor is actually saying, yes, okay, I'm going to invest in the shady deal because I think it's a good idea. It breaches both of their policies, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. At least having some sort of transparency over that rather than allowing them to do it.
Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be an ethical investment aspect to it if we've got equivalents at a local level. And the fact that we're represented on this body, I mean, it is a separate entity. It should have its own authority on this stuff, I guess. But the fact that we are represented on there making those decisions means if it goes to the YMCA authority itself, then
So
hopefully those councillors can make a sensible decision. If North Yorkshire suddenly adds a new policy about what not to invest in, I would hope that York would go to that meeting and go, yes, we also think this should be, restricted at a mayoral level.
So, yeah, councillor Melly, then we'll see where we are.
Thank you, Chair. On this set of pages we're looking at the moment, 154 and 155, there's 3 paragraphs that all refer to reports about treasury management going to places. And I just thought maybe that should be cleared up just to make it more succinct. So 10.3 says that relevant reports about treasury management will go to the combined authority. And then paragraph 11.1.2 says it will go to the combined authority. And 11.1.3 says that actually the combined authority delegates the receiving of those reports almost to the Audit and Governance Committee. And I found it a bit confusing, kind of understanding who's actually receiving reports on these policies and scrutinising the policies and that sort of thing.
So clarify who receives which reports and which is further delegated, and if so, why?
Had to read it about 3 times to actually understand who's responsible for looking at treasury management policies.
No, that's a good point. So in terms of, sorry, councillor Healy.
Super quick point. On section 9, it refers to York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority or mayoral as appropriate. And then all the language then changes and there's no reference at all to the mayor. Now, I'm guessing if the mayor's got a capital and revenue budget, he's also going to have borrowing and investments. They may do.
Yes. So.
So where it says in the name of York and North, so 10.1, which is the start of it, shall be in the York and North Yorkshire's register of stocks. Should that be York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority or Mayoralty's register of stocks? And then that would have to then flow all through the document.
Yeah, I mean,
because it does earlier, it splits it out, or it's got. So for instance, on 9.2, it says to seek York and North Yorkshire or mayoral as appropriate approval for the use of balances, reserve provisions, etc., etc.
So I think there's probably a check to be made where it refers to the mayor or where it refers to the combined authority or where it refers to one or the other. To make sure that's it's correct in that it is actually, it says one or the other for a reason, or it says both for a reason, and it clarifies. That's probably a broader point.
Yeah, I'll take this back to the section 73 officer.
Yeah, that which probably goes through the entire document.
Yeah. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking. My assumption is this is correct because it's the YMCA that holds all of the finance and it's their treasury management policy. It's just that there is a budget within that is mayoral, but definitely worth double checking each instance is correct.
I agree. I think that is the case. And if that is the case, then we can clarify that.
Okay. So it's going back to the point around sort of borrowing and investments at section 10. So it talks about ensuring Treasury Management Code of Practice and Prudential Codes are complied with. Do we want to add something in relation to have regard to investment policies of the constituent local authorities? Do you want to be stronger than that? Not to be in conflict with the policies of the constituent authorities? I don't see why we shouldn't say that.
The only challenge with that is if we change things, does it auto flow to a separate body that has their own authority? That was the reason I'm saying it. The fact that we are represented there means that obviously we can take it up if something changes on our side. We can just ask North Yorkshire to back us on changing it at a mayoral level as well.
Have regard to, which is a term I hate, but I think that's probably the best we can get away with. Okay, it makes it what our expectations would be. Okay, so we're still on page 154. Anyone has any further comments on that page? 155. Contracts. Nothing on there. 156. Five, seven. Right, hands go down. Councillor Rose.
It's only a tiny one, in line with what was said previously about the section 73 officer being a him at the bottom on 1314. It also says every chief officer will be male as well. So
Well,
I know we've already picked up elsewhere, but perhaps not.
yeah, there's lots of find and replace needed in this document. I had a comment on paragraph 13.11, subpoint B. What happens if there's a difference of more than £2 million? So if there was a decision to dispose of a piece of land considerably below market value for good reason, what happens?
There is a lengthy consent process that the authority would have to go through in order to gain a consent from the government to undertake that disposal.
Okay. So there is something.
There is a legal process outside of the constitution.
Right. Councillor Mason.
I was going to say, can you almost widen that with a percentage figure or something like that? So if it was a £1,000 piece of land or £100,000 piece of land that the mayor wanted to flog for 10 grand or something, there's, how do you capture all of the different variances you could have, opposed to just saying it's going to be so significant that it's,
It's just an absolute under the order. So the
Yeah.
legislation sets out what that limit is.
So we can't add in anything similar to that, saying anything that's sold for under 10% should be referred to this or should have this, or
The order would supersede it, would be my interpretation. Because essentially the order gives a permission from the government to sell a piece of land and anything up to £2 million under value. If we consider that there are benefits to doing so, there'd still have to be reports to justify that and all the rest, but it's just a blanket decision.
just seems to be something that's very, very hot in the north recently, that type of issue.
Councillor Eyre.
Is that £2 million apply to everything? Because obviously on the sale of a piece of land, that's quite a considerable sum. In terms of a long lease, a 20-year lease, for example, £2 million wouldn't necessarily amount to being massively below market value. You might be saying, well, actually, instead of £200,000 a year, we're going to rent it for £150,000 a year on the 20-year lease, and you would hit 2 million on a long lease a lot sooner than you would on a capital sale. There's like those two figures. There should be a separate figure for a sale and a long
My
lease.
understanding is it is just a single blanket figure. That's how the order is set out.
Well, there's a 1311, a reference to an act. I imagine that, I don't know whether that would preclude consideration being given to whether there was a lease at a below market rent or market rates. Councillor Nelson.
In 13.13 on this, I mean, I've never seen the word lesser before, but I'm assuming that's the leaseholder. So it says leased items should only be disposed of in accordance with the instructions of the person holding the lease.
No, sorry.
Have I got that
The
wrong?
lessor is the person who owns the land who leases it
Oh,
out to a
good.
lessee.
That makes a lot more sense. If it's the other way around and they didn't agree, that would be a very strange thing to have in the document. Thank you. You
Yeah,
tell I'm not a landlord.
I'm not sure what, I suppose the point's been noted around, yes, this is an absolute figure and it stems from legislation. I suppose the point was made around if sort of consideration given to where there are other arrangements in terms of a long-term lease that would reflect a lesser market rate for legitimate reasons. That should at least be transparent, I would have thought. To a social enterprise or some other entity that was delivering social benefits. But yeah, we've made the point. Hey, anything else on page 157? Nope. Page 158. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 14.6, the Section 73 officer can write off bad debts. £100,000 is the limit to which they can write it off. Anything more than that, they have to take it to the combined authority. £100,000 seems rather a lot for a Section 73 officer just to be able to write off on their own. However, I accept this may be a part of the underlying legislation. I know we discussed a similar thing at the last time related to gifts, I believe, or something related to that. Would there be any chance or opportunity or scope to lower that amount by any amount?
I might be wrong about this and Bryn may correct me, but I think this is the same as City of York councils. I think. I may be wrong about that.
No pressure.
It would not surprise me on the basis that obviously our Section 151 officer has been the interim Section 73 officer. But I would need to check. It's a while since I've looked at ours.
So we can answer that is, you know, if ours is 25 grand, then yeah, that would seem unreasonably different. But Councillor Hook.
Yeah, I just think it's worth telling the other people that they're writing them off in case they've got the same risk as well on their sales ledger.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, it's just if someone's not paid up 100,000 or any amount really.
Yeah.
It's good to share that around so that you know that if you've got the same person on your sales ledger, then you've therefore got to probably write them off or something.
I suppose if the constituent councils were also clients of a that organisation, they may want to do that. Yeah. Councillor Steele-Walshaw.
So it's one under stocks and stores, 1317, and adjustments for surpluses and deficiencies. Should an annual report on write-offs go to audit and governance? And just really, really minor, there is two 1317s. It's the first one.
Yeah, so Section 73 officer authorised to write off. Requests to write off items more than 500,000 must be reported. It seems a reasonable suggestion that obviously it's not going to audit and governance for approval, but just as a report, say these requests were received. Yeah, we're happy with that. Good. Councillor Mayo.
I was only going to point out the paragraph numbering error.
Okay. So anything else on that? Page 158. No. Yeah, Councillor Melly.
Just the same thing about the Section 73 officer referring things to combined authority for information, same as, yeah, paragraph 3.17 and paragraph 14.6. I think a kind of similar sort of reporting for information. Should go to the same body, same committee.
To A&G as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, page 159. I had one comment on here, paragraph 17.1. It's kind of suggests internal audit is optional in terms of the officer shall, insofar as they consider necessary, arrange for the provision of an internal audit service. I wouldn't have thought that would be, you know, a kind of, well, shall we not?
There certainly has to be an internal audit service. I'm aware it's already under development with, I believe, the combined authorities going to use Veritao as well. So,
so it's
I appreciate that it's somewhat vague.
Well,
yeah,
it seems the words "so far as they consider necessary" are
unhelpful. I suppose the problem is that it's tried to use a generalisation to cover three separate points. So the first one is about arranging the internal audit service, then it goes on to supervising security arrangements, and then undertaking investigations. It may well be that it's better to try and separate it out. So it shall, one, arrange for the provision of an internal audit service, 2 and 3, so far as they consider necessary, supervise and undertake. I think that's probably a better way of doing it, because then it's clearer.
Yeah. Councillor Fisher?
Okay, B2, the risk identifier, sorry, press the button, it hasn't gone. The risk identifier should be included in the corporate risk register, which shall be subject to periodic review. Should we specify that should go to the Audit and Governance Committee specifically for review? Because that's how we do it, for example, in this authority. And I believe that's good practice to have, because if you said review to the combined authority, I think we need a wider scrutiny on it than that.
Yeah, because that's how it would happen here. So the risk register, corporate risk register should be subject to periodic review by the Audit and Governance Committee. Okay, so still on page 159. Any more comments? Nope. Page 160. Now into purchase orders and co. Councillor Hook.
On 19, I just think that's very sketchy. It doesn't say who can make the payments and what amounts and all that sort of thing.
19.1.
Because as I say, with the check one, it said it had to be the section 73 officer. And so making payments or other, so it doesn't balance with that one.
So suggestion is there needs to be more granularity.
Bit more.
Councillor Melly?
Just wondering whether paragraph 20.1 could and should be written in plain English, if this is a public document, to help the public understand how the combined authority works. You shouldn't, in a basic paragraph, just one sentence about petty cash, you shouldn't have to Google what 2 words mean.
Impressed. It may be sort of, finance speak, but it's beyond me. So yeah, that's I think a fair recommendation to look again at the wording of paragraph 20.1. Any other comments on that that page? Nope. Page 161. Nope. Page 162. Yeah, Councillor Melly.
Paragraph 20.1 is about financial management and internal controls, sound procedures, etc. Just wondering if that should go to the Audit and Governance Committee as well. It seems like the sort of thing that's in their remit.
Sorry, which paragraph was that?
22.1.
22.1. Responsibility for maintaining and reviewing the system of controls rests with the combined authority. I think certainly the reviewing bit certainly has audit governance has a role in that. So again, it's probably the wording needs to be revised to incorporate to reflect the role of audit governance in reviewing internal controls. Yep. Okay. Page 162. Any comments from anyone on that page? No. So 163, we get into contract procurement rules and grant rules. The contents page may also not be aligned with the content, but we won't worry about that too much at this point. Page 164. A brief guide to contract procurement rules and grant rules. Well, it's not very brief. Necessarily lengthy, I think. 165. Sort of a bit of a glossary, really. 166. 167. Councillor Melly.
Are considerations of social value commercial or non-commercial considerations?
Which paragraph were you looking at?
Well, it comes up in several places, but in the top paragraph on 167, it says that non-commercial considerations, can't be considered, can't influence any decision. But it also says that you can consider social value. I wasn't sure if that was contradictory or if social value is somehow assessed in a commercial way.
Yeah, because there's, I suppose, the top bullet on 167, I suppose it's not clear what is covered by these non-commercial considerations, if it doesn't include the things that are then mentioned in terms of things which are clearly non-commercial, but support the corporate aims and policies.
Like corporate aims and policies include things like keeping the air clean, I think.
Yeah.
Which is presumably a non-commercial consideration unless you have a way of putting a financial value on air quality.
Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. I don't think we would have ever made a contract decision that didn't include non-commercial considerations. I think that sentence is wrong. Either we should add except where appropriate to the end of it and leave it vague, or we just delete the row altogether, because there are so many non-commercial considerations made in every single contracting decision. When you go out to tender, you've got a whole list of questions that you're going to ask every time, and it includes what are your standards on the following different areas of social aspects. It's going to include the reputation of the organisation, not just their price point. And it's very prudent and sensible and good that we do have those in their considerations. So
that has the potential to negate a lot of the other.
Yeah,
bullets.
most of those bullet points aren't commercial considerations.
Yeah, I think it does fit very oddly there, and I'm sure that probably wasn't the intention, but seems odd. Councillor Eyre.
I'll just put Bryn on the spot because I was doing a quick Googling, and apparently there were 90 non-commercial considerations included in the Local Government Act 1988 Part 2 that local authorities can't take into consideration. Does it refer to that? And if so, can we make reference to whatever that is to clarify? I can't get what the 90 are because I'm just behind a paywall.
Okay. So some kind of footnote explaining what, because it uses capital letters, which normally means it's a public term thing.
Yes.
Ensure that the non-commercial considerations specified as insert link do not influence, just so it's clear what it doesn't include. Yeah.
I mean, on page 174, it specifically says non-commercial considerations that are prohibited under UK law. So it's effectively the same thing, but so whether it's supposed to be the same thing, but I can't see non-commercial considerations defined anywhere. So yeah, either it should be removed or it should. I mean, we can't break the law. I think it's probably something that doesn't need to be in the Constitution, but I'll leave it to the rewriters.
Okay, so just clarifying what that does actually refer to, and just so we've got comfort, it's not overriding all the other things that are legitimately in there. Okay. So we're still on page 167. Any other comments on that page? No? 168. Six, 9. Yeah, Councillor Burton.
2.4 on
Yep.
page 168.
Yep.
Where is the Register of Officers' interest kept? And is it publicly available?
2.4. Declaration of interest in contracts. So where would that register of interest be held?
I would anticipate that would sit with the monitoring officer of the authority.
Okay.
As for whether it's publicly available, I don't know. I would be honest.
We can take that away and consider that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Steele's Walshaw.
Can we say the same just for that one for 3.2 and 3.4 for where the records are kept as well and whether they're publicly available?
So 3.4, all exemptions and the reasons for them must be recorded by officers. Section 3, Central Officer will monitor use of exemptions. Yeah, so something around how that record would be kept and how it would be available. So is it 3.4? What was the other one?
3.2.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Nelson.
I'm just wondering whether it would be valuable to add some more information or a bit more of a hierarchy of who can make those exemptions. Because obviously if it says if a value is likely to exceed £50,000, then it will go to the section 73 officer. But for anything where they're looking to waive some of the procedural rules to, give out a grant or a contract under £50,000, whose responsibility is it to agree or not agree that exemption? Because theoretically, it could just be the person who wanted to do it otherwise.
Rachel?
We are looking at a scheme of sub-delegation, which will deal with the day-to-day. It won't feature within the constitution because this is a movable feast in the first 12, 18 months. I mean, the City of York Council, all councils have a sub-delegation scheme, which allows them to operate on a day-to-day basis. So we can certainly, we can have a look at that.
Would that be, in that case, that if this said all exemptions are subject to the section 73 officer or sub-delegates, in the same way that all work in the council is the responsibility of the council administration delegated to officers and things like that?
There'd be a scheme of delegations and the constitution would not replicate that, but would say there shall be one. So I suppose that's the next step is to actually put that in place. To sort of give effect to this, oh yes.
Yeah.
I think.
I will take that away as well.
Okay. Councillor Melly.
Thanks. I was just going to say, on the subject of declarations of interests in contracts, the Officer Code of Conduct has a section on declarations of interest on page 207. So it probably doesn't need to be duplicated.
Okay. So that's in the codes of practice.
Yeah.
Stuff. Okay. Or maybe cross-refer, please see part 7 for yeah. Good. Page 160. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, it's just, I said it at the start and I won't say it every time it comes up, but section 3, again, there's just nothing about audit and governance. Exemptions, all sorts of stuff in here. There should be some form of reporting. There should be some form of accountability to A&G before it gets to the YMCA main council. So I don't, I wouldn't. There have been some points around where people can access information outside of meetings. There's some stuff around annual reports. I think there's just to try and go through it line by line and call all of them out. There are dozens and dozens of things where the A&G should be in charge of things and should be monitoring it and taking ownership of it. And probably does have that authority in the 2 existing councils. So.
Yep, that's a A fair point, well made. Page 169. Page 170. So I had one comment here, paragraph 5.1, it's top of page 170, final bullet under paragraph 5.1. Setting out these matters in writing if the total value of the purchase exceeds £50,000. So my initial thought was, well, I would expect something in writing if the value was under £50,000. I think it then does go on to set out, there's a table later saying about what would be required in terms of paperwork for different levels of expenditure. But I just think that that final bullet is potentially misleading because it could be read as meaning I could spend up to £50,000 and have nothing in writing whatsoever and just wing it, which I don't think is the intention. So again, if that could be looked at just to make sure it's not giving a misleading impression of financial controls. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, we agreed last time round that it was the purchase order was the written record.
Yeah.
And just a side point, the same thing. I don't think we've mentioned at any point, but I'm assuming all these bullet points are going to become A, B, C, D all the way through the document, because trying to label which paragraph we're talking about in a long list of bullets is relatively inaccessible. So just if that's something that can be amended at some point, that'd be good.
Yeah, I agree. Just make it difficult to refer to what you're trying to refer to. So we're on page 170. Any comments on anything on that page? No. 171. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of 711, there is reference, and I personally don't have any objection to it, but the official journal of the European Union in terms of tenders. So it is a wrong observation that I would make that was referring to that.
Yeah, I suppose that could be a hangover from a previous iteration, but I suppose it's just worth checking that that's still a legitimate inclusion. Anything else on page 171? Nope. 172. One comment I had on paragraph 8.1.4. Where the total value exceeds £50,000, the procurement team should be consulted prior to commencement of the procedure. I'd like to think procurement team should be consulted in any event if you're launching a procurement, regardless of the value. But this may well reflect what the City of York Council's rules are. I don't know. Maybe something along the lines of, if the value exceeds £50,000, the procurement team must be consulted. But in any event, the expectation would be the procurement team would be consulted as a matter of course, regardless of the value of the procurement. Councillor Eyre?
I just go to my length of time thing. If it's a 20-year contract for paper, or something quite particularly small, you could very easily tip into £5,000 in the contact procurement on a £5,000 10-year contract. You could draw very, very small amounts into annual amounts into.
But I think distinguishing between must, they're over £50,000, and may, or however you want to word it, you know, whilst not requiring every paperclip procurement episode to be, yeah, I just think it, as it stands, it seems a bit loose. Yeah. So must for over 50k and, you know, may wish to, or may wish to have regard to the existence of a procurement team. Councillor Nelson.
In a similar but opposite vein, in 8.2.1, the section 73 officer must always be consulted where contracts to work for other organisations are contemplated. It just strikes me sometimes, you know, teams might take part in, say, some small scale consultancy based on an area of work that they're really good at or something like that, where it seems a bit much to have to consult the section 73 officer to undertake any sort of external contract where a team might be sharing their knowledge or sharing their practice or something like that in a contractual way.
I don't know whether there are specific rules about public sector organisations trading their services in a.
My understanding is that in a smaller scale way, it's not uncommon for certain, I suppose, as an employee of a city council, an area of a city council in Leeds, we still occasionally will do some consultancy into other similar organisations around areas that we're good at, is where I'm coming from on this. You know, really small scale stuff that's about sharing practice, but where there's a contract involved. And on this, on that bullet point, that would suggest that a sub team of a team that are doing a bit of work within their sector for a contract would have to ask the section 73 officer first.
Councillor Rose.
I'll put my hand down just because I think it's a bit muddy. I guess my question would be, if there's already a contract, then that's fine, because the contract was the point at which everything was agreed, and if someone's just doing work within it for free, then that's no issue. If you're talking about an external organisation paying for council time and the questions around potential conflicts of interest in them possibly being a supplier or stakeholder at the same time as us being a supplier to them, and I don't know what the rules and regs are today, so I think it depends on the exact situation we're talking about, possibly.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether it would be, you know, it would be worth putting for anything over a certain amount in the same vein that all of the other things have a figure in.
It's probably more around, I don't know, perceived or actual conflicts
of interest. I suppose the other thing is that the intention is not to have a large organisation like City of York or anywhere else. If you've got, you know, 50 or 60 people working for you or working full time, the prospect of then taking a chunk of those out to do a contracted piece of work means that actually there's a danger of a lack of capacity in house. And it may well be that the section 73, who structurally is going to be one of the most senior officers there, is the person who's deemed as appropriate to say yay or nay.
Yeah. Councillor Eyre.
I think that was sort of a wider point I was going to make, is that I don't want to build this up to being massive into what it is. I think that's why I go back to the procurement thing and the treasury management thing. And I think the more we start layering things in, I don't want massive treasury management team, the combined authority replicating what we're doing, massive procurement teams and massive comms teams, massive community. That shouldn't be what it is. It should be a skeleton staff doing what the combined authority needs to do. So there shouldn't really be any staff that we would be looking to do external work. So I think that's just wasn't necessarily disagreeing with that. It was just the whole thing about be wary. The more we put in here that people have to do, then the more they have to pay somebody to do all of the things that we're insisting. And pretty soon, 20% of the budget will be gone on legal staff and procurement staff, and there'll be nothing left for anybody else.
Okay. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. When we're selecting contractors, I understood that this council insists that they are pay a statutory minimum level of wage. I think it's actually the living wage. I see nothing about that in here, and it would be slightly worrying me if we had a combined authority that was not paying the living wage when we, as one of the constituent authorities, do that. I haven't seen it. I may have missed it, but
What we spoke earlier about these, you know, non-commercial considerations and social value. So I think it's I think it's although, yeah, it's not explicitly picked up in there. Do we want to make explicit reference to it? Councillor Melly?
I'd also made note of that on the previous page, paragraph 7.1.2. It says that officers are responsible for ensuring that all candidates for relevant contracts have the necessary economic and financial standing to fulfil the requirements. I kind of wondered whether it came under that. I made a bullet point saying paying real living wage should also be a requirement, but yeah, I couldn't see it specified anywhere either.
Councillor Rose?
I mean, I assume it's not in our constitution in York either, because I'm assuming it's a policy thing, not a constitution thing. Because the definition might flex year to year, or the number might change or whatever, but it definitely should be reflected in the practices. And it should be flowing from us to them as well in terms of that commitment, really.
I think it's in our procurement policy procedure document. So I think that's where it is here rather than in the constitution.
Yeah, I guess the limit of having it in a policy is that it's very easy for senior officers to change that policy on the fly, and there might be less accountability and visibility of it in the mayoral than there is one level lower.
Yeah, Councillor Melly. So do we, I suppose we've kind of flagged the issue. It's something we would want to see somewhere, ideally referenced in the constitution, but if not, certainly in the financial standing orders or whatever procedures, whatever they would be. Councillor Ray?
I mean, I think it goes back to that one with the treasury management. If we're in line with North Yorkshire, it makes it easy because you can say it should follow the same policy as York and North Yorkshire. I don't know if North Yorkshire have got that in. And if they haven't, that would put us in a difficult situation and saying, well, actually, we're stressing for that. And North Yorkshire will say, well, we don't do that. So if we could get perfect harmony between all our policies, that would be great. And we could just align everything across the three, but I'm not sure how we do it otherwise.
Be a longer term piece of work.
By which I'm not advocating single authority, by the way.
It's a task and finish group in itself. Okay, so we've flagged that up. I will take a pause shortly because we have been going for a while. I'm trying to figure out how near we are to the end.
59 pages to go, Chair.
In finance. Sorry.
Overall.
No, don't depress me by saying that. In terms of part 6, I think we're not too far away, I don't think. So we're still on page 171, 72, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, we talk about thresholds, and statutory thresholds are a defined term, but it says the values at which the relevant UK public procurement law applies. It gives no real visibility of what that is. I would recommend in the definition on page 183 to say which at the time of publication is, and then have a bit of a, these are what those thresholds are in practice, because 50,000 add up to infinite, and there's another bit later that says the same thing again, but for a different set of thresholds. It might be that the threshold is 100, it might be the threshold is 10 million. I have absolutely no way of knowing without trying to Google what all public procurement law thresholds are and figure out which use case it is. So it's impossible to use the constitution to know what threshold that is. It probably will change if there's a change to law. However, it'd be good to just have at the point in time today what that is.
Yeah, fair point. Councillor Melly.
I was going to say something about, I've got confused about what page we were on. I was going to make a point about page 173. Is that where we are?
No, we are now.
Okay, sorry, I've got ahead of myself.
That's fine.
I was just wondering why the instruction of council isn't subject to the rules about the appointment of consultants to provide professional services.
Which paragraph number is that?
8.4.8. Like
instruction of council, as in barristers.
Yeah. So they don't even have to have a brief that describes the services that they'll be providing, or a contract of appointment, or
No.
like the rules just don't apply.
No.
Why?
That's absolutely standard in local government, because at the end of the day, if you're instructing council, they will be subject to a brief that is prepared in order to instruct them, and you will get a quotation from the chambers. But you would not expect to issue a contract of employment or contract for services to a chambers.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councillor Mason.
Just in general on consultants, I wonder if there's any way you can caveat it so that even if it's small amounts of money, it could be very regular. I know we've had issues before with consultants where you have a regular agreement, so it might be individual agreements, but they're regular. And that's obviously a risk then that it falls through all the different safety nets. So maybe, I don't know if it was redone so many times or over a certain limit, you know, within a set number of years to one company, then it falls through some of the criteria where it gets picked up.
Well, in terms of multiple short-term things that added together.
If I have, you know, 10 grand consultant contracts in a year or something, at what point, you know, it's the same thing that is acceptable, but at some point it also feels like it should need some extra scrutiny.
Is there a specific recommendation you want to make, or just ask that be considered?
So I don't know if any value over £50 in a calendar year to one company or something. I don't know. Whatever feels appropriate within those other thresholds. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Healy.
Question really. The two tables, the one at the top 172 when you're buying a thing, and then the one on 173 where you're buying consultants, it's much higher for consultants. And I almost would have thought that either they should align, or even the consultant figure should be less than a thing. So it's
Okay. Is there any reason why there's that variation in values?
Not that I can think, Chair.
Unless it's just something that another authority has done, so
It would certainly make sense to mirror the provisions, and then everybody knows they're on the same rules no matter what.
Right. Yeah.
Councillor Eyre. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's where Councillor Mason's comment comes, because if you employ a consultant at £29,999 a month for 12 months, you only have to get one written quotation. And that person's then getting 360k a year off the authority with no checks and balances off a single written quotation. If you did it as a full-term contract,
If you're doing it
on a month by month basis,
per month,
and then you go to the next month and go, actually, I'm going to employ you again for another month at £29,999, and then do it next month. That's 360k a year with one single written quotation with no oversight whatsoever.
So it's the annual aggregate total is what you should be looking at, yeah.
But at what point does that trigger if you keep doing it at separate points? Something needs to, don't know what the answer is, but it's take away and have a
certainly
think.
worth considering, Councillor.
Okay.
We'd like to give you problems to solve as well as.
Yeah. We are trying to come up with solutions as well. So we're on page 173. £174. £175. £176. £177. Councillor Nelson.
Actually, this one's from Councillor Merritt.
Things around.
But it has come up already, but 18.1.1, all relevant contracts that exceed £50,000 shall be in writing. So I take it that if it's £49,900 pound contract, it doesn't need to be in writing.
So this was a point that came up earlier, and which from memory, from when I was reading it, I thought, that was resolved later, but I'm not really sure it is.
Well,
Councillor Melly.
paragraph 18.2.2 says all contracts must be concluded formally in writing, which kind of contradicts paragraph 18.1.1.
Yeah. All contracts must be concluded formally in writing before the supply, service or construction work begins, and there's no reference there to a value. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I think that 18.2.2 is implying where there is formal writing, it must be in writing before the work begins. I mean, it's still, doesn't have a threshold in there. It still says except in exceptional circumstances without saying what that means. I think that bit needs cleaning up to not just say not in writing when it is in writing, it's just in a purchase order rather than confirmed elsewhere. But I mean, it does need tracking and capturing, and exceptional circumstances needs defining, and at the very least an approval process if it is undefined.
Bryn?
Yeah, I think some of this is around clarification about what the wording actually means, because a contract can be in writing if you get their standard terms and conditions on the back of an invoice for, 5,000 boxes of paper clips. And there's a difference between that and having a lawyer sit down and write a bespoke contract for something that's £60,000. But you're right that it needs clarifying as to how they're expecting in writing to be.
Councillor Mason?
I think I'd quite enjoy the job of sealing contracts with wax, but I wonder what the legal difference is in terms of the values, and is there a reason at certain threshold it has to be sealed, and what does that mean legally in terms of, does it give any extra assurance, any extra check?
No idea.
Put in simple terms, ultimately the council, whether it be this council or whether it be the combined authority, has to maintain a register of the documents that it seals. So if it's specifying above this limit, you must apply a seal to it, then that must be contained in that central register of documents. If it's below that limit, then it doesn't necessarily have to be maintained in there.
But it would still be recorded in the normal expenditure somewhere else.
It would be recorded in probably in a list of contracts somewhere maintained by procurement. But then usually there's a very nice large leather bound document which says Register of Seals.
Councillor Healy?
18.2, the last line says total value above 250,000 should be sealed. But then when you come to 18.3.3, the last bullet point says the total value exceeds 75,000.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a bit of an inconsistency there. Sealing.
What's our ceiling limit at the minute?
Trying to keep up with council.
Don't know.
You know, Bryn?
Top of my head, I'm going to say it's 100,000, but I would need to go back and check.
So it's nearly 7:15, so I suggest we've got to paragraph 19, bonds and parent company guarantees. So yes, we have a break, stretch your legs. Sorry? All right, oh, sorry, yeah, well, because I'm doing it the environmentally friendly way, I can just. Right, so paragraph 180, any comments on paragraph 180?
Page 180.
Sorry, page 180. No.
Silly point.
No.
18.8, yeah, where am I? 18.4 signatures. Authorised signatures may sign and witness by way of, no, that's fine.
Okay, moving on. Page 181. No, sorry, Councillor Nelson.
Sorry, it was page 180. I hadn't turned it over yet. Another gem from Councillor Merritt is the officer must consult with section 73 officer about whether a bond is needed where the total value exceeds £1 million, but not less than £1 million. So, I mean, I assume that the section 73 officer would need to be consulted if a bond was, £650,000 or £900,000, but it does say here where the total value, not until the total value exceeds £1 million.
Okay.
If you write in your observations and feedback, we will.
Look at why has that number been chosen? Yeah. Yeah, if there's a reason, it'd be helpful to know what it is.
Seems like quite a lot of money,
So page 181, page 181, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, it says high risk, high value or high profile in 22.1 on page 181. High risk and high profile is probably very subjective, but high value can be a fixed threshold. We've got various definitions above of 75k or £1 million or whatever it is, but can we define that?
It's in the definitions on page. Yeah.
Oh, it just points back to statutory threshold values then, okay, sorry. Yeah. See previous one.
Okay. Councillor Nelson?
I'm just reading Dave's email now. Are we on page 181? Is that right?
Yes.
For number 23, should external bids over a certain size go on the risk register? Thank you, councillor May.
Which, what, where's this? Which paragraph?
23
23.
about grant agreements.
Yeah.
It says, should external bids over a certain size go on the risk register, but he didn't give me a sub-paragraph. Am I in the wrong section?
On the risk register.
Oh, I'm in the wrong section. Ignore me.
Okay. Anything else on paragraph?
Yeah, there is a councillor merit point from section 23 for the correct bit, and that's about whether grant award procedure should go past A and G.
So should grant award procedures go?
Yeah, 23.1 and 23.2. Should A and G be managing those procedures?
Managing, have oversight of?
I don't care.
Okay, I think that's an eminently sensible idea for A&G to have visibility of grant awarding procedures. Why not? Page 182, which are the definitions, which we're not going to allow any questions on the definitions. So well done. We've concluded that part. So if we now have a break and return at 25 past, councillor Kelly.
Sorry, I had a question. It's not about any particular page numbers, which is why I'm mentioning it now. And yeah, I wasn't sure when best to mention it, but basically for the sections that we're reviewing tonight, I had a look and cross-checked it with like the Greater Manchester Combined Authority Constitution, their latest version. And it seems like this is basically identical, it's like a carbon copy. So it'd just be good to understand what the key differences are for York and North Yorkshire, basically apart from changing the wording of York and North Yorkshire from Manchester.
The changes will be in the order for York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. So it's a 2023 order. We'll have the nuances that are particular to York and North Yorkshire.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have a break until 25 past. Thank you, members. Thank you.
Oh, that one.
Okay, so we're on the last leg, part 7, codes and guidance. So before we start, I'll just ask Rachel to briefly provide a bit of context, particularly in relation to the code. Rachel.
So the members' code of conduct is a lift from the model code. There are no adaptations to it. I think at the last meeting at 10.2 on my page numbers are different in relation to gifts and hospitality. I think we were tasked with checking the amount because the model code is £100. I think City of York are 25, and we were tasked with checking North Yorkshire. I think North Yorkshire is £25 as well. Other than that, the code is the model code, which has been adopted in York, is adopted in North Yorkshire Council.
Yeah.
And we've lifted it out of the model code. So the terms, the provisions within the code should mirror what members in York are already bound by.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm sure when we get to that paragraph, we'll pick up the the sort of gift value point. We'll pick that up again. Yeah, so we're not rewriting the code tonight. That will be subject to review by audit and governance, which is how that's handled. Any general points before we launch into this? Councillor Rose.
It's a big point, but it's my last point that I've got noted. You'll be pleased. But starting with just on page 188 on the members' code of conduct, there's a broken point on point 6 where it should say Appendix A, the 7 principles of public life, and then Appendix B, register of interest. But it's about that point. So this is the templated code of conduct. No concerns in there. But what we haven't got is as much on the member officer relationships and officer code as we have in York. So there's a big discrepancy in that, and I'm just looking through the list. So for example, Nolan Principles Appendix A, it's here against the councillors, but it's not here against officers, even though Nolan Principles obviously are transcend that barrier. There's on page 209, there's a whole bit about member officer relations where it says members must not say anything negative about officers in meeting, and officers shouldn't say anything negative about each other, but it doesn't say, and members shouldn't say anything about one another, and officers shouldn't say anything about members, even though in other parts it talks about that being a referral to monitoring officer outside of that meeting. So there's a whole bunch of stuff around 2.3 and 2.4 on page 209 around that. And then earlier in the document, there's a whole question around code of conduct breaches. And I hadn't spotted last time around, so forgive me for bringing up on this one, but on page 58 or whatever the actual number is on this document, it has stuff around it being the monitoring officer who raises things only to A&G in exceptional circumstances, and then also says that they arrange for the appointment of an investigating officer to investigate a complaint, and that then goes to a hearing, but it doesn't define any of that. Separately, it has a bit around the determination by A&G of whether somebody's breached conduct, and it also has a hearing created by A&G that's a subcommittee to manage the code of conduct, that then when it's decided the outcome, the consequences are decided by A&G. So just flagging all of that, there's a big gap in all of the officer behaviours on these meetings that is covered by in the councillor's case, the code of conduct, but there's a gap there. That equivalence between the two in member officer relationships is stilted one way. It's all the stuff in here is good. It's just missing other things that match that. And then what happens if someone breaches the code of conduct is, I would say, impossible to say for sure based on the current wording, and would benefit from a lot of tidying up of exactly what, who's investigating and how that gets decided by hearing and who calls those meetings and that stuff. So, sorry, that's a very large substantive point.
Yeah, no, and I'll ask Rachel if she wants to make any observations, but yeah, there's a reference to a standards committee that's somehow a subset of audit and governance. But
It's a hearing committee that's called by the monitoring officer based on the investigating officer, but then it's actually a subcommittee of A&G, but nobody knows who's going to sit on it because it's an A&G. So it's just, yeah, there's no real procedure in there.
So in York, you have audit and governance committee and a standards committee. Because of the number of members you have, in comparison, the combined authority membership is much smaller.
Yeah.
So at the moment, the standards committee is within the A&G. So A&G, their remit is standards. Some of the local authorities run that method as well. So as a standards complaint progresses, if it will be, so there will be regular reporting into A&G. I'd imagine there's a section of A&G probably towards the end. So A&G will deal with all the financial and governance matters, and then there'll be standing agenda item around standards complaints, if there are any, the code of conduct, the complaints procedure, when that's due for review or renewal. Within the complaints procedure, which isn't part of this constitution, but it's been published on the Combined Authority website, there is more detail around what the procedure is. They aren't usually in detail in a constitution. It's usually a separate document.
No, totally understand. My point isn't that it's the wrong level of detail. My point is that it conflicts with itself throughout this document. There's various bits that say things that contradict other bits of it. So it'd be good to make sure. So it doesn't reference a standards committee within A&G. It references I can't remember the right phrase is, a something hearing, which is part of A&G, but presumably comprised of a smaller number of people. That's effectively a subcommittee. It might be that committee. If it is, that'd be good to clarify. And what the role is of the different, how you log with the monitoring officer that there is a concern, and then what happens, trickles down. But also, because there's a clause in here that says members aren't allowed to criticise officers untowardly in meetings, but there isn't about us criticising one another, it'd be really hard to get a code of conduct case against a councillor having a go at another councillor inappropriately if it's not clear in the code of conduct that is wrong. So all these different bits and pieces are scattered throughout the constitution, which is why I've struggled to work out where best to raise it. But it does all need tidying up and needs to be consistent along with consistency against that procedure.
We can have a look at it and we can compare it with other local authorities, other combined authorities, and see if there's a better way of.
I think what you're describing is right. It just isn't what the constitution says at the moment, in my opinion.
Okay.
Councillor, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's another point. I didn't know where to raise it, so I thought we'll start at the beginning and then I'll probably be quiet after that. It's just that the general principle of this code of conduct and how it sits with our code of conduct, because obviously, if you're sitting as a member of the combined authority on any of those committees and appointed, then yes, you are there as a member of that committee and representative, so therefore you're bound by this. But you are there as a representative appointed by City of York Council, so you are covered by the CYC code of conduct. So anything you do in that in that role, to me, is by both. You could have how do those two interact? You could put a standards complaint into the combined authority and CYC or North Yorkshire. You may get different views from monitoring officers, which is then leaving a situation that I just really can't see how that, and some of the about where it applies in terms of when you're on the phone. Again, that's always been difficult to define, as we have done. So someone puts something idiotic on Twitter, for example. Are they acting as a personal capacity and as a CYC councillor and or personal CYC and a member of the Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee? I don't see anything in here that sorts out how those overlays work.
We can add some clarification to that. You're absolutely right. If it's a comment in relation to business that's been discussed at an A&G, Combined Authority A&G committee, and they are an A&G member, it's more clear cut, but we can certainly have a look at that and we can provide some further clarification around that.
I think there's bits around the outside of it as well are going to be hugely problematic to you, because you could be referring to the business of the Combined Authority Committee, but you could say, well, actually, I was doing that as a CYC councillor, saying the rest of the committee are all idiots.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it as a committee member. I was just telling my colleagues that I think all the people on that committee are idiots. But it's a mess.
I think it, the way I read it is that the areas around member expectations could be read as applying solely to the mayor, who I suppose it's possible, I don't know whether it is possible or legally permissible for the mayor to also be a councillor on either of the constituent authorities.
No.
No. Okay. Answered that question. So I kind of read it as applying primarily to the mayor, but I hadn't, factored in the potential. Yeah, well, there will be dual-hatted members who are members of the combined authority and the constituent authority, and which code do they adhere to?
So it's the same as members who are appointed to sit on other authority bodies.
Yeah.
If there's a, so if you think back to when you had a separate fire authority, I can think back to what it was like when I was in the Teeswell, where you had 5 authorities and then you had a separate fire authority, and a member could be covered by both codes of conduct at the same time. But then if you were transacting fire business, you were only deemed to be covered by the fire code, for example.
It works on some simple stuff, but when you get into the disrepute level, it could be argued that you were bringing the combined authority into disrepute while you're not necessarily bringing the city council into disrepute.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. The clarification needs to be put in.
Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all of that. And I think the intent of this and the fact that it's standard wording means that it's just extending our responsibilities over the committees of the mayor and our brethren in North Yorkshire, and making sure that we're treating them the way we treat one another in York. But there is that situation where you could end up being pulled into 2 separate concern points around the same thing that you said, because you said it in the public arena and nobody really knows what you're saying. And before I was a councillor, made public comments that I don't necessarily respect the office of mayor that's being established, and that could easily be taken as something that could be taken into one of these meetings if it's taken the wrong way, or if I said something similar in the future. And you end up having different outcomes in 2 different bodies, but it's effectively the same code of conduct. It definitely needs clarity that in the scenario where you're acting as a York councillor, the referral, like with officers here going into HR, you get sent into the City of York Council procedurals. But I know we're not looking at the code of conduct today, and A&G will fix that. And A&G is comprising members of both councillors. But yeah, I think that as long as it's extending what we've got today rather than replacing or overlapping with what we've got today, that's the main thing for me.
Okay. No, I think those are kind of valid points, and hopefully can be reflected in sort of some kind of preamble to the code. Councillor Nelson.
In a sort of general way, and I'm not actually sure how this could be changed, but it does make councillors sound like the worst people in the world. I just wonder whether any of it could perhaps be slightly more positive. I appreciate that as a code of conduct, it has to set out very clear parameters, but it does sound like there's just some shady councillors trying to break the rules left, right, and centre. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like the way it's all like, I don't bring myself into disrepute, I don't attempt to use my position improperly. All of these things are really important, but it just, when you read them as a list, it just sounds really negative. But the one that particularly I picked out was 7.1. It says, I do not misuse I don't know how people say yours and not yours resources, but then the next one is, I will, when using the resources, do this, that, and other, which would mean that you're not misusing them. So, like, does it have to say both of those things? Or could it just set out the procedures for properly using the resources?
The wording is a direct lift from the model code of conduct.
It just makes us all sound like we're absolutely terrible, but I appreciate it has a job to do.
Yeah.
There is also a point in number 9 about this is not my point. This is Councillor Mayor's point. It says table 1, but it should say appendix B, table 1.
Okay.
At the end of number 9.
Councillor Eyre.
Sorry, I said I was going to shut up, but Councillor Nelson's raised something else that's a bit of a problem. I don't imagine there will be York and North Yorkshire combined authority resources therefore this needs a little bit of thinking, because technically, if you took your CYC laptop and used that, then you would be potentially misusing breaking the CYC code of conduct and using that for non-CYC. But that
This code
it needs
does,
to be, unless everyone who's on the combined authority is going to get their own laptop and various
no, but
different
the code
devices.
does include the mayor and so we're
Yeah.
not, it is standard wording, but it will
Yeah,
cover.
I think for those elected members, the resources will be the resources of their constituent authority, not of the combined authority. We will have
In those circumstances,
PAs,
yes.
we will be printing stuff in the CYC printer if you want it. You will be using the CYC office for those kind of works, unless there's a fantastic combined authority office somewhere where we can all sit. Those of us who are elected can sit and drink tea and coffee and print stuff and use the Wi-Fi.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. Any of the, we're kind of having more sort of general points, and that's fine. So we'll just kind of have a ramble through and pick up general points. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I have to depart, Chair, but the only other 2 points I had were raised on the last meeting, but are in this section and haven't been changed. So I just wanted to call out on page 217, it talks about respecting human rights in 3.13. Last time we suggested advancement and inclusion of equalities. So I know we covered it previously, just making sure this point is covered here as well. And then page 2 and 8, we talked about webcasting last time at length. I wouldn't suggest revisiting it, but it still only says main meetings and scrutiny. It doesn't say ANG business committee. What I suggested of transport committee, which I still think is a necessity to include, given that it's a third of the responsibilities and doesn't have its own subcommittee. But there's webcasting is very limited on what meetings it covers. So, but they were raised last time, so I don't think they.
Yeah, no, but it's was a reminder. I'm sure that's probably on the list of.
Yeah, it is, and the combined authority are going to consider the issue of webcasting at their March meeting. In relation to a transport committee, my understanding is that we're going to wait until the mayor is in and to make a decision on that, so that will probably be deferred until the June meeting.
It was a long point that I had in the first half, so I didn't read on this meeting. I've got lots of points around what's now in there that's different to what was in there before, and stuff around joint transport committees with the two councils, and there's a lot of complexity in there, but I think it should be locked in before the new mayor. But
yeah, I think
another time.
I think our view is clear that we believe there should be a transport committee. That, yeah. Councillor Melly.
Are you happy for me to raise a specific point in a specific paragraph? Or are we doing
Please.
kind of general?
Yeah.
I know that we discussed the threshold for having to declare gifts and hospitality last time. You don't want to revisit that. But paragraph 7.1 on page 203 says that there will also be a public register of gifts and hospitality under £100 that were offered but refused. And I'm just not sure that's reasonable or practical. I mean, as a councillor, almost every time you have a meeting with a local stakeholder or local organisation, you get offered a cup of tea. Do you have to fill in a form and report that to the head of paid service every single time? And then is it actually in the public interest for the public to be able to see what organisations are offering that sort of hospitality to councillors? I think it implies some sort of disrepute on their behalf that they're trying to bribe a councillor because they offer them a cup of tea in a meeting, or like it just, the way it's worded just doesn't seem reasonable, practical, or in the public interest.
Paragraph are we on?
7.1 on page 203.
Okay.
It says registrations as regards gifts and hospitality offered and refused of a value less than £100 will also be available for public inspection. I just don't see how the head of paid service or councillors will have enough time to register all of those. I mean, I apparently under this code of conduct have 2 refused gifts hospitality today to report because I've had meetings with various like local organisations. You know, it's like 10 a week. It's just not reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that wasn't the intention, but that's certainly how it reads. Yeah, Councillor Burton. Which may be to the value of £100 or more.
Not in my copy. Oh, sorry, hang on. 10.2.
Two sentences are slightly contradictory, and in one of them they use numbers to represent the value, and in the second one they use words.
On page 201. Sorry, thank you. On page 201, in the first paragraph, 1.1, it says £100 in numbers, and in page, and then 3.3 at the bottom, it says £100 in words. If you just want to note of doing these.
Whilst as lawyers, we have a penchant for doing both at the same time. Usually it's in the same phrase. I think that probably just needs looking at to ensure there's a degree of clarity and actually that what the purpose of it behind it is.
Yeah, because that's clearly not the, it's not the intention to have to declare every. Yeah, it's. Just turn your microphone off, sorry. That's fine. Yeah, if you were offered a gift to the value of £95, I think it's not unreasonable for that, which you would refuse, for that to be declared. That's standard practice in some organisations I've worked in, where that's that degree of transparency is required, but not the offer of a cup of tea. That's clearly.
I think the other point, of course, is as we've had, whether that £100 is correct or whether actually it should be £25, which is what the York Constitution says, and likely the North Yorkshire's Constitution says. If you read it like that, then at least it sort of improves things slightly, because there's an obvious register for anything that's over £25. For things that are under £25 that you don't have to declare. So if you choose not to accept it, you can still declare that you've chosen not to accept it. But if you just don't accept it, it's actually under the threshold anyway for declarations.
Yeah.
But I think some of that wording just needs to be tidied so that the intention is clear.
So I think how we operate is £25, a gift either accepted or refused that's of a value over that sum would be declared. Anything below that would not, whether accepted or refused. Councillor Mason?
And it says for public inspection opposed to published. You know, it will be published on the website or something like that.
Where are we looking?
Just that same paragraph. Registered available for public inspection, which is normally means kind of you can turn up at a council office and ask to see a copy or something like that. Whereas I think we should be publishing it. And I just wondered how that relates to officers as well, those limits.
I'm not sure we do publish.
Yeah, mine are. It's on the bottom of your declaration of interest, everything you declare.
Yeah, for councillors, yeah, we declare that. I don't know whether it's the same for officers.
Chance would be a fine thing.
Yeah.
Showered with gifts and Councillor Nelson.
I just wanted to lend my support to sort of advocating for that to be a £25 limit. It fits across all of the existing local authorities, and £100 seems like a lot, but £25 seems like if someone's offering you that or above that, then it is in the territory, I would say, where it should be being declared and registered and things like that. But also it's a clear cutoff where things below it aren't ever going to be a massive deal, and you can decline your cups of tea without feeling like you need to register them, or accept your cups of tea, maybe even a biscuit without.
Yeah, and I think that was, a point was raised last time, but I think that's been heard in terms of what our strong preference would be. So are there any other?
Is it worth mentioning that it's first mentioned on page 195, top numbers, 10.2.
Yeah. Do members have any other general or specific comments? Councillor Melly.
I've just found a bit that I was frantically looking for earlier when Councillor Fisher raised the issue of real living wage.
Oh, yeah.
In the Code of Corporate Governance on page 221, it says that part of the social value will be, considered through suppliers and partners through procurement and commissioning, and that includes providing the best employment that you can. So I feel like it's implied, but maybe should be more specific.
221 is that?
And also maybe this kind of list of what's been agreed as the combined authorities considerations of social value needs to be referred to in the procurement section. Needs to be
Yeah.
referenced.
It seems odd. It seems odd for it to be here, but not.
Yeah.
Certainly cross-referenced at the very least.
Yeah. And I also had a question about how this list was kind of developed and approved. And if it's something we can comment on, or if it's just, you know, completely out of our power. It's copied and pasted into the constitution, that doesn't mean we can change it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is lifted from a different, a different combined authority, but I'm guessing it was part of the asks that on the basis of which the government agreed the combined authority. I don't know.
I think this is pretty standard in constitutions as well, if I remember rightly, with reviewing this constitution. There was a chunk missing out of it, and we put the chunk back in again that's based upon other local authorities. So I think a lot of this is pretty standard, but we can certainly take it away and have a look at it.
I would expect certainly the mayor and the combined authority to look at 5.12 in terms of that bullet list to seem slightly random.
Yeah, well, because in this paragraph, it says that some of it is to do with the Social Value Act 2012, and it says that the combined authority has also adopted a social value framework, you know, and then lists the values of that social value framework. So at some point, the combined authority has adopted these, and I'm not sure what the process was for doing that. But the reason why I was asking is because it doesn't say anything about kind of carbon emissions and climate impact. It talks about clean air and making the organisation greener, but not about the impact on the, you know, climate contribution to the climate emergency more generally. Yeah. It seems like something the combined authority should be considering if they're not already.
Councillor Eyre?
Yeah, I think the clue is in the tense. So that very first sentence you got, the combined authority has been proactive, and well, it hasn't. It has never done it. So I suspect this is lifted from a combined authority that has been proactive, and this was their list of things that's from the constitution we've lifted it from. So it could be whatever we want it to be. So
yeah, so that needs a sense check.
Yeah.
Proactive, yeah. And then we've got the point about cross-referring to what we say earlier in terms of contract criteria, which goes into a bit more detail here. Anything else? Councillor Melly?
Again, I know this was covered at the previous meeting and it's been, you know, accepted by everyone, about gendered language. I think some of it where it says his/her, that can probably quite easily be found by doing, you know, Control F and searching for it. But also in this document, there's quite a few references to just his. Like there's a lot of roles where, you know, it refers to the Section 73 officer as, you know, his. And in this section we're looking at now, it refers to something for the member and his family. That is even more problematic than his/her and harder to find just by doing a search. Because if you just try to find, if you do a search for every time that his appears in the document, it will come up with this and history and like everything. But it's so important that it's found. And I know it's a big document to go through, but I mean, so I know that the combined authority is recruiting at the moment for Section 73 officer, and I'm sure it's like breaking equal opportunity law to have a constitution which assumes that a man is going to be hired and, you know, kind of says that the role is only for a man. So it's really important to find it and fix it. But I know it's just going to be a bit of a difficult job.
We will do it, don't worry.
I think it's a space is space, then it picks the whole thing.
It's a good search tip there from Bryn. I had a quick question on page 213, paragraph 7.1. Correspondence between an individual member and an officer should not normally be copied to any other member. Is that a lift from our code? Yeah, just the word normally, I thought, didn't seem.
I'm fairly
necessary.
certain our constitution says should not be. That's
not.
not correct.
Yeah. So I think the word normally there, I would want to see removed. Particularly if it would bring this into line with what our constitution, our code says. Any other points from anybody? No? Have we exhausted ourselves and everybody else? Okay, so we have concluded our thorough review of the evolving combined authority constitution. I'm sure the combined authority are very thankful to us for our work and our input. And thank you, members, for your time and your patience and commitment to seeing this through to a conclusion. It's much appreciated, and yeah, I've learned things through reading this document and asking questions. So hopefully we're all going to be super attentive when things happen that we think, well, it shouldn't happen that way. That's not what the Constitution anticipates. So that concludes that agenda item. And thank you to Rachel and Bryn for guiding us through that. We don't have any urgent business. We don't have to look at a work plan because this is a special hybrid meeting of the two committees. So I shall wish you a good evening and safe journey home.